My name's Casey Rodriguez. I am the Client Services Manager here in Otis. And for this month, for our Lunch and Learn, we're going to be talking in more detail about admin rights, specifically what they entail in terms of your computer, what you're able to access, and then also involving some of the changes that we've had here at Portland Public in the last few months, and how that's going to keep improving into the future in terms of what you're able to do on your devices and how we can make sure that you're able to do the work that you need to, and also be safe at the same time with performing that work. So we will get right to it. And so, important thing to clarify as well in the beginning, we have a lot of terminology in IT, and so it's really important for us to understand how that lays out into what we're discussing today. So things to take note of for you is just when we talk about standard accounts, that's the regular user on a workstation. A standard account's going to have limited access to certain features, as it's meant to just be for regular staff or even at personal use for a regular user at home. Administrator accounts. So we use the term administrator here a lot, Portland Public. It can be a principal, it can be someone in a department. For account usage, that's typically an account that has elevated access. It's considered a account that's able to access features or components in the operating system that would be specific to someone at an admin level, a systems administrator, or someone that should have the ability to pretty much adjust anything on the computer. Then we have access rights. These are the rules in the background. They can be at a user level, they can be at a computer level, and they dictate what you have access to. Sometimes it can mean certain files, and in that file you have certain types of access, to where it may mean also different components on the computer. You have access to, add printers, but you may not have access to install drivers. And then our other terminology to take note of is software center. So this is our particular term, as for the computers that we use, some of them will have a software center that's going to have listed software that can be automatically installed, that can be available to all Portland Public staff, and it makes adding or removing certain components easier for the users on those machines. And specifically with account access, I want to walk over how that works from a computer or even operating system level. We have individual users, and based on the permissions that we assign for your type of user, or even for file shares that you're in, you're going to have limitations in terms of what you're allowed to do. And this can translate all the way up into Google Drive, right? So we have Google Drive files. We share those to individuals that are at our organization. Well, sometimes I can share those files and say, these individuals only have read ability. They can see the file, they can look at it, they can't modify it, they can't move it, they can't delete it. And the same goes for the computer you're on right now. So there's going to be areas where your file permissions may be different from your user permissions, where you're unable to go into a certain folder and delete things because they're core to the computer. So the permissions on those files are going to be limited to very specific accounts. And we can talk about standard accounts. Automatically, they're going to have access to the desktop. They're going to have access to their own user components, their files. But there may be some areas where, as a user, if I want to change a setting, it's going to ask me for additional prompt to say, hey, are you sure you're this person, to verify that change. And the same thing for administrator accounts. These are our top level accounts. So typically throughout the computer, their role is going to dictate what rights they have to which components. And normally that's going to be everything that's available. And then there may be some areas for admin accounts that will still require a prompt to verify you're the admin user. Please put in additional information to make sure that works. And that is a basic overview of what we should expect on our computers, both our Mac devices and our Windows devices. We're working that way for our Chrome books or Chrome boxes. Those permissions are really going to be based at the Google Drive level, depending on who you have files shared with, who has shared files with you. And most importantly, we understand how this functions. I think really important for all of us at Portland Public is really understanding the why. Why are these features important? Why do we need to, have an opportunity to talk about these more? And essentially, it makes sure that at our local workstations, so the devices that are all assigned to you, as well as for the organization, we have levels of security that ensure, one, we're able to do our work, but two, we're able to take action if we have bad actors in place, if we have situations where we may have malicious software that's populating through our network and trying to get into other systems. So at least at a local workstation level, for your standard user to not have like elevated admin rights, that helps prevent malicious software from taking action. Because a lot of times that software is going to try and look for credentials. Maybe they're able to steal your credentials on the device. Then it tries to go and run other programs. Well, since you're a standard user, you won't have the permissions to change those components on your workstation, or you won't have the permissions to be able to navigate to other computers on the network. So that's kind of our first layer of defense there, is to ensure that, okay, that local level access is protected. And so we're not going to see that start populating through the computer. Then at the network level, it's important as well for workstations. So we will have network segmented so that certain workstations, they can only be accessed via VPN, which is an additional protocol for making sure you're on the right network. They'll have limitations about who can access those. So we have like our support individuals in our department. They have admin accounts to say, yes, you're allowed to remotely access this virtual machine, but only you, because you have that level of access. And then for our organization as well, I mean, the most common item we're always trying to share from Otis is that we're here to protect students' information, staff information, as well as public information too. So we want to make sure that this information is not easily accessible, that the type of admin rights that you have on your device would not allow for this information to be stolen, or for areas in our organization to be impacted to where, maybe we have a department like finance department or the business department having issues being able to accomplish their work because of some of those admin rights that could have issue. Also, in terms of licensing, we have to ensure that we are compliant with terms of service. That's a very high level thing for us. It involves other companies. If we're ever audited, they're going to want to find out, are these properly licensed? Do you have the rights to be using this software? And for an organization wise, that helps us in Otis to ensure that, yes, we're doing what we can, and we've taken the steps to ensure that we're doing everything for the organization as well as down to that local workstation level. And then again, for anyone who had come late to this, we do have Q&A opened up in Google Meet. You should be able to see an option for that. So if you do have questions, you can submit those while we're talking, and then I can address them because they'll all be listed out at the end of the presentation. So now that we've talked about really the reason as to why the admin access is important, how these user accounts function in terms of their standard rights, what you're able to access, then we really want to talk about, what are the changes, what's kind of the setup we have here currently at Portland Public, because that's impactful for all of you at PEC, as well as our staff at the surrounding schools. So by default, any regular PPS account, so my account, C. Rodriguez, Manny, for anyone else, when you sign into a Windows or Mac OS device, by default, you are a standard user. Previously, in years past, users would have admin level rights. So for PPS standard users, I have a couple of examples here of what you may not be able to do, which is install software that does not already exist in our software center. There may be some system settings that are protected that you wouldn't be able to manipulate. So one good example is in Mac OS or on Apple products, there are some privacy settings that can't be changed by a standard user. So that may prevent some software from having access that it shouldn't into sublevels of the system. They're also both on Mac and Windows. There is a command prompt or terminal you can go into and type in commands into. Those will be ran as a regular user, so you can't be running scripts off. They'll require administrator access. Same thing with installing drivers. So that's one area, that I think in Otis we want to make sure we're assisting. There may be some areas at the PEC or other schools you have peripherals that you need to use. Most peripherals should be able to install automatically, but there may be some very unique situations, like I think, label printers, different types of scanners, things of that nature. They would require additional drivers. Standard user won't be able to install that. That would need assistance. And then also at the core level is the file access. So like on a Windows device, if you try to go to the Windows folder, start changing things there, standard user won't be able to do that. You'll primarily have access to your user folders on your device. And that's what we expect. That's what we want to make sure, one, that you have your own space that's protected. Two, you're not necessarily saving files to spaces that shouldn't be saved. And then really, so you have that level of what a standard user has access to, and then we just have our different devices that you would be expected to use. So for Chromebooks function differently. There isn't a special administrator account local to that device. All users are treated the same. It's dependent on what policy we set for the device. So if you have certain settings on your Chromebook you can't get to, that's pretty much the policy for everybody. And for MacBooks, for a standard user on a MacBook, at least in the last couple years, Apple has made it very apparent that they want to ensure that privacy and settings are locked down to protect users as well as the device. So there could possibly be more areas where maybe a software on your computer wants to provide you prompts. Depending on where it's trying to access the information settings, you may be restricted from doing that. And that's something where our team in Otis has to make sure the MacBooks are properly set up for that. And then for Windows as well, it's basic. Users are standard by default. And then we have background items that allows for administrators to, perform work that they need to elevate. That's essentially what our scope of setup is right now at Portland Public. And this has been the case since December of this last year, where we slowly rolled that out throughout the district. All right, and as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, we have software centers. So for modern day device management, we have the tools necessary to be able to deploy what we call packages or software and have it available for users to install when necessary. One of the areas that we're navigating now is establishing what's all the software that's being used out there. What is a regular use case for our teams at the PEC, and then trying to make sure that we have those available. So for whatever device you are on, you can find the software center, and I'm going to show you in this in terms of where that can be found. But for Mac OS, there's the Launchpad, and then there will be something that's called Software Center. Same thing in Windows. So thankfully, they both have the same name terminology. It's just a matter of finding them. And then I've also made that a point in Otis too to work on, hey, let's make these easily visible for users so nobody has to go find and search them and figure out where they are. But as of right now, you would have to at least go follow these instructions to go look for that. And then we expect to expand these libraries of software as we continue to improve our service. So I have a couple screenshots here. It's an example on Mac OS. So on the bottom left, you would have this grid icons, the Launchpad. You'll see this PPS logo for the Software Center, and then there'll be essentially almost like an app store. You'll be able to go scroll through there, find the software you need, click install, and then it automatically will take that process and handle it for you. Without the Software Centers, as a standard user, you would be limited in terms of installing. So this is meant to bridge that gap and ensure that if there's software that's being used and we're supporting it, it's going to be in that Software Center. And a lot of times too, with the admin rights, you may already have software that's already pre-deployed to your device that you don't have to worry about. One example of that, Zoom. Zoom is usually pre-installed as well, and that handles itself based on what we have set in the background. All right, and then we have Windows. If you go down to the Start menu, type in Software, Software Center will populate right there. This is what the icon looks like, and you'll have the same experience. You'll have a list of software that's available for Windows only, and that's going to be improving as well. I know at the PEC, we're very Windows heavy, so that's an area that we're definitely going to make sure that this Software Center is managed, that we're having clients that are up to date, and that you're able to install those components as well. So with these admin changes that came in December, the component I think is really important right now is that we're able to have a proper path for requesting software, and that we have a proper path to ensure that the software you're using or your team is using is being supported. So these are just a few things to consider when you, as one of our staff members, may be in a position to say, hey, I have software that I'd really like to use, or our department has software that we're currently using, and we just realized, oh, we can't update the software, or we have somebody new here, we can't install the software because we don't have that admin right to do so. So one of the first things I want to make sure that users are aware of is this something your department is using as a team? Is this something that we know that all of you together, this is part of your workflow, you can't do your job without it? How can we make sure that everyone has access to that? And we've also been able to run reports as well to see what software is out there. But it's important for Otis, we have to be able to review these software to see, especially with open source or free software that's being used, we want to make sure that there isn't any issues with what data is being shared to the vendor. One good example recently was a company called Audacity. It's an audio manipulation software. Ownership changed, and so it started gathering more personal information about what was on the device, and it was sending it to another country. So that's the areas that we're looking at least for these software components, to ensure, is this safe for us to use? Are we going to be okay for doing that? And at the same time too, if we're requesting software, you had your teams using software, or I know all of us have different software that we prefer to use, right? For capturing screenshots, for Word versus Google Docs, things like that. If you have a preference, it may end up being that we already have a tool that fulfills that need or that bridges that gap. And so that's one thing to always consider. If you do have a software request, or if you do have something that needs to be submitted, that there may be a situation where we have an alternative, and that's kind of the choice. That's the option that you have to use. And we'll make sure that, at least in Otis, that we can make sure that you're up to date on that, that you have the tools that you need to do the work that you're doing, and then we can facilitate if this is something that you're not used to. It's a change, and there is change involved in this. And so that's something to consider with the requesting piece. So at least for PEC, right now, your quickest method to request software is going to the support portal at pps.net and providing us all the information that you need for that software. We've been actively collecting that right now. So I know at least in the last 2 months, we've been receiving requests to help us in terms of what people are using, what they're requesting, but for any future software too, that's your direct path right now. It's a little different for curriculum at the schools. Those would typically go through Learning Tech. So they have a portal for digital learning to request that, we can still receive that request in the portal. We would just be working with Learning Tech on approving that software and making sure that that's in line with what they already have available for everyone. I know at least for this subject, a lot of our time can be spent on questions or follow-up answers or kind of concerns or any other questions.
Do you have a list of programs that have already been like requested and reviewed at all? Just as far as things go forward to prevent you guys from getting, 500 requests over a 2-year period for the same, can I install Audacity again yet? Is there a list of, or is there a plan for a list of reviewed and rejected versus under consideration?
I know we have it for the digital toolkit, but I think for Otis having their own list in terms of like for PEC and stuff, I think that's a great thing that we should do. We don't have one right now since we've been gathering all that information, but I'm definitely going to take note of that and say, yes, we should try to make sure that we already have a list lined up in the same way that we do for school staff. So thank you for that question. But as of right now, no, we don't. So that means if a request is being submitted, it may end up being that, yes, we actually just built out something that we're going to support that. And then also at the same time, to add on to this too, if we have certain instances where you have software that needs to be updated, that's not in our current support package right now. Service Desk has the ability to help navigate that. So that's one thing I really want to emphasize here too, is that if there are important updates you have for, I think one example I saw was like Notepad++, for some of our unique instances of software, Service Desk is available via the phone line too, or through support to say, hey, let's schedule a time. We'll get a Service Desk person on there who can elevate that software to be able to update it for you too. I think I have another question here from Luke Wisher. He says, does the Software Center have additional permissions for standard users, or is it open to all? Right now, Software Center is available to all users that I'm aware of. I'd like to see it be more granular so that if we're able to do it based on, we call them workstation groups. So if we're able to do that based off groups, then we'd be able to like isolate PEC or certain groups and say, yes, there's additional software available to those users. That way we have better license management. That way we can ensure that, for someone who's in a different department, they see this additional software, they say, I don't even know what this is. What should I do with this? So the hope is that will continue to improve. All right, and then we had another question from Luke. Let me check this other one off here. It says, when you say privacy settings, specifically Apple devices, does that include microphone, camera settings, if a user adds Zoom or another conference software? So yes, Apple is very restrictive when it comes to microphone and camera settings. Typically what we have a policy, or we call configuration profile, that states like these specific software, they can have access to that. Because there may be some software out there that you need camera access and it won't let you have that. Chrome is actually a good example. If we did not have a configuration profile for Chrome, it wouldn't be able to access the camera or the microphone. And that's intentional by Apple to ensure that those items are secure. And if you are having issues with Zoom having access to the camera, that shouldn't be a problem. So definitely put in a ticket with us if you do see those issues, so we can make sure that you're getting the right policy to your device.
Casey, I just had a follow-up question. So what is the fastest way if we needed to conclude privacy setting issues on software other than Zoom?
Well, the fastest way is for us to document it and then get it up to our user experience team. So the preference would probably be, you can probably call in and let them know, hey, I'm experiencing this behavior. Here's the listed software that I'm having issues with. Here's the prompts I'm getting. And then that way they can immediately get that ticket going and send it off. At least the typical goal for Service Desk is that any tickets that come in that day, they're being properly assigned to the groups they need to go to. But it may also be dependent on our user experience team on their ticket queue and where that's going. But if it's something that's impactful for work, they would set that to a higher priority, so that we can make sure you're on your way, that you're not having a whole day spent not being able to use the software or the components that you need to.
I was just thinking, like, so if I find out that a WebEx meeting or a Skype meeting comes up, and then I'm on an Apple device, I can't just go in and tell Apple to let Skype use my camera and microphone. I mean, maybe I'll know a week ahead that it's on Skype or something, and then I can tell IT. Is that what you think is the best protocol, or is there like a day of situation?
Well, at least most providers, including WebEx, for those meetings, like if you're working with outside vendors, you have the option to join via the browser. And that kind of gives you that tunnel of access to say, okay, I'm joining WebEx via the browser, I'm joining Microsoft Teams via the browser. So it's already going to have that camera microphone access.
Okay.
If we're needing to, for whatever reason, if there's a need for WebEx to be installed, because I know there's very unique instances where you need a full client access if you're working with groups that you're hosting and WebEx is the only tool that can be used for it, then yeah, we would do our best to make sure that we can get that installed and the appropriate access to that as well. Same day, it may be, I can't always guarantee they're going to be able to do that, but at least through the browser piece, there should be a continue through browser option to be able to get that access for the camera or the microphone. And I think the worst case scenario is the telephone option. So we always have, I think all these conferencing tools have the telephone option available that people can call in if for whatever reason you have issues with those permissions. All right, and these are good questions, so I appreciate that because that helps us all kind of remind some of those avenues that we can get into these conferencing calls and trying to navigate the same day if there's something acting weird. All right, and then just to follow up too, because I know the admin rights were, 3 months into it here at Portland Public Schools. I know the PEC has a lot of important work to do. And so we're definitely working to prioritize, the different software requests that are coming in for any individuals that are in a position they need to update or they need to install software that's applicable to their work based on these admin rights. Definitely call our service desk, definitely reach out to us at support.pps.net. And I know we're actively looking for those to make sure we can get you taken care of.
So I just had one follow-up Mac related question, because I know recently the first user that signs into a MacBook becomes the owner. And then if they try and do something like do a software update or something, are the software updates now managed by OTIS where we should ignore those, or when it pops up and it says like you can't do this because it's you're not the owner, like if you have multiple users using the same MacBook.
I know that because I remember discussions on this, and I know that they were working on improving that because that was a very unique component to the MacBooks on first time user ownership piece. I believe there was something that they're going to be incorporating, but I'm going to have to go verify.
Okay,
I can follow up with you on that because I know they were going to fix that. I know my Mac today was saying that I need to update. So I was wondering if myself, I wanted to go find out and see that, okay, is this the case now that we can update properly?
Okay. Yeah, I just have a team that uses Apple devices and they think I know everything. So I'm like, no, I'll find out.
Well, and I mean, we don't have that issue on the Windows side, right? Non-admin user updates are going to populate there. It's going to say, hey, you need to restart. You do it, you're done. Mac OS with the ownership piece is very unique. And then our population of Mac devices is considerably smaller too. So we're trying to make sure that that component is taken care of so everyone can be up to date. So I appreciate that question as well. If you do have any follow-up questions at the phone number or through the portal, we'll make sure that we're keeping an eye on those tickets. So again, thanks again for your time, and I hope the rest of your day goes well.